Hey everyone, welcome to Just Being Booky, and today I am going to be sharing some of my notes and going more in depth for some Bible journaling that I've been doing. I recently got this Bible and I started Bible journaling in it about a week ago. I've really been enjoying it, and so I figured I'd share some of my notes with you guys. So I've been diving into the Psalms because I figured that that'd be a good place to start, especially because it would have a lot of opportunities for notes, and it also isn't something that I've reread multiple times, such as Genesis, because when you're starting to get back into reading your Bible, sometimes you tend to go to Genesis to start back into the rhythm, but then that doesn't get you as much sometimes. So let me flip over to the first chapter of Psalms and see what I'm going to be sharing. Alright, so in Psalms 1, it's pretty short, so I only have one note here, but it's for Psalms 1 verse 2. It says, "But they delight in the law of the Lord, meditating on it day and night." And I wrote consistency, consistently seek and reflect, because it reminded me of how you need to keep going back to it at every moment that you have, which in reality is actually every moment that you are in, because you can go back to him regardless of what you're physically doing. You can turn your mind back to the presence. And on Psalms 2 verse 12, technically it's part of verse 12, but it says, "But what joy for all who take refuge in him." And I have for seek joy, for it has already been graciously given. Because sometimes I think that we forget what joy that we already have access to through him and through his sacrifice. And so even when things are hard, we can have joy in the Lord. And I've also been doing this thing where, let me grab my note cards, where I've been highlighting and writing notes for anchored truths, which I don't know if that's a term elsewhere, but it's my own for me, which is things that I've highlighted or added notes to, or both, of things that are forever true and help us stay anchored to him. And so the first one that I highlighted is, "Victory comes from you, O Lord," which is Psalms 3:8. And I wrote, "The only thing that comes from people is temporary approval. The eternal victory is from God." Now, while these temporary things may seem like what you need in the moment, you need to remember that these things are not what you truly need. And also, I'm not saying any of these things like I don't need them, or that I'm I don't have moments where I need to go back to these verses either. I'm just phrasing it in a way that's more direct, and so that you can receive it hopefully in the same way. And then we have in Psalms 5:8, "For you alone, O Lord, will keep me safe." That's another anchored truth. And I wrote, "Shields can be stolen, walls and barriers can be broken down. Don't trust in anything that can only give you temporary cover. Trust in the Eternal One, who will not let anything keep you from what you are meant to do, as long as you continue to trust and follow him." I think that pretty much goes without adding something to say. At least I don't have anything to add right now. If I do, while I'm editing this video, I will add it with some text, but otherwise I will continue. Then I highlighted Psalm 5:8, "Lead me in the right path, O Lord, or my enemies will conquer me. Make your way plain for me to follow." And this one is kind of like a little prayer that I added in the notes, where I said, "Without you, God, my right path is unclear, my view obscured, but with you I can see clearer." Note that I put clearer, because not everything is completely clear and straightforward, even with him, because certain things are not meant for you to know at this time, and certain things are not for you to know to begin with. They are just part of the complex and beautiful process and plan. And then next I have Psalm 6, verse 9, another anchored. I have Psalm 6, verse 9, another anchored truth. The Lord will answer my prayer. I wrote, it doesn't matter what it looks like. He is answering your prayer right now in the way that will fulfill your bigger purpose, which is greater than you could ever imagine. Which, with this, without it being said, is saying that regardless of what you were expecting to happen when the prayer might be answered, it's going to be answered. It's just not necessarily going to be in the way that you expect, think you need, or want. It will just be answered in the way that is best for his plan for you, which oftentimes is not going to feel like an answer. It's going to feel like another setback. But we need to go back to the truth that it is an answer. And sometimes in the future, you will go back and look back to that situation and realize the connection. Sometimes you will never know the connection, but it's impacted through different ways, and someone else will get something from it. Then in Psalm 8, verse 3 and 4, I have, when I look at the night sky and see the work of your fingers, the moon and the stars you set in place, what are mere mortals that you should think about them, human beings that you should care for them? And I wrote, how great are his works, and how great are his love for us. Which, when you think about it, look at nature, look at weather, look at the world, look at space. If he cares that much to make intricate things of those aspects and details, how much more will he care and put detail and intricacy into our lives? Then I have in Psalm 9, verse 7 and verse 10, with a connected note for an anchored truth. But the Lord reigns forever is verse 7. And then verse 10 has, those who know your name trust in you. For you, O Lord, do not abandon those who search for you. And then I have written down, nothing can happen without his knowing. Nothing can happen that doesn't in some way fall into his eternal plan. Everything has an impact into his plan, even if you never see it. Which that makes it sometimes a bit frustrating and confusing, because if it has an impact, why don't we see it? But that doesn't always have an answer. It doesn't even always have a revelation. It's just known by him and is impacted through others, to others, many that we may not ever know. Then I have in Psalm 10. Then I have in Psalm 9, verse 14, save me so I can praise you publicly at Jerusalem's gates, so I can rejoice that you have rescued me. And I wrote that, always remember and rejoice to the one who brings you through, but also don't forget to praise him in the midst of the good and the bad. Reflect in each, for you are still here, so he has more plans for you. This can always be applied in the good as well. Sometimes I think we forget to recognize and be thankful for the good things that we have. Not everyone and not every time, but it is something that happens, and sometimes we can control it, other times we get completely blown off track, and then we have to remember to go back. Sometimes we just need to stop for a minute and look around and realize that, or not necessarily even realize, just re-recognize the fact of the good and being grateful and being happy and rejoicing in the good because of him. Then in chapter 11, verse 1, I highlighted, trust in the Lord for protection. And then I wrote, for he never fails, and everything that is done fulfills the greater plan, and nothing, not even death, changes it. Some of this can sound a little repetitive, but it has the different context and a little bit of a different perspective and analogy or relation to it. Because you may have a situation or will have a situation where you feel like something wasn't fulfilled the way it was meant to be, because it was too soon, too sudden, or there wasn't a chance to do what you thought was what was supposed to happen. But we also still need to remember, like I said before, that whatever happens has an impact and a fulfillment on a certain level. Sometimes it can be an impact on someone that you don't even know knew you or knew them. It can be an impact on someone that you'll never meet because they are in generations after you. There's an impact for everything. And like I mentioned before, like I emphasized before, frustration can still happen, and confusion and not understanding things is still a part of it. It's a part of the process. It's just a matter of what we do with those reactions and those feelings and that confusion that impacts what we do moving forward. In chapter 13, verse 6, I have it highlighted both as a regular highlight and an anchored truth. And I have the note, remember his faithfulness always and forever. And I have highlighted 13 verse 6, I will sing to the Lord because he is good to me. And I have written down, remember his faithfulness always and forever. Even the small things are a worthy reminder. I don't want to sound cliche or typical or just like one of those feel-good quotes, but you have to remember that with every breath is something to be thankful for. And so you never truly have a bad day. Your day is never truly ruined. You always have something to be thankful for. You always have a part in the day that's good. It's just a matter of what level and how you see it and how you remember it. Then in chapter 18, verse 9 and 9 through 11, I have highlighted, he opened the heavens and came down. Dark storm clouds were beneath his feet. Mounted on a mighty angelic being, he flew, soaring on the wings of the wind. He shrouded himself in darkness, veiling his approach with dark rain clouds. And I have written that this can be showing us how I have written down that this can be representative of how, in our eyes, the rescue or answer to our prayer, or even an impact to our life, may not look like something good, as I mentioned before, because it is veiled in what looks like something bad. But through that is what happens to make something good. Like I mentioned in the one thing that I wrote in something separate, because it may look bad, storms and clouds and rain, but once you look past the rain, you can see that there's a rainbow. There's always a rainbow. There's always something that you can look towards that is going to be good and is going to be an answer and is going to fulfill. And then we have in Psalm 18, verse 23, an anchored truth, I am blameless before God. I added the note, because of his sacrifice due to his unfailing love, which we need to remember both things and make sure that they stay connected when we remember them, because we need to remember that he doesn't remember our faults, and so if there's nothing that he sees, why should we go back to it ourselves? Which it's not as simple as the statement sounds, it's not as simple as the statement sounds. I'm not saying it is, it's just how it has to be expressed. Because of his sacrifice, nothing that we have done or will do will be seen in his eyes. It is gone because of his sacrifice. And so focusing on it will just hold us from our purpose instead of moving forward in His love. Then I have Psalm 19, verse 6 says, "The sun rises at one end of the heavens and follows its course to the other end. Nothing can hide from its heat." And I wrote next to it, "Equate this to His love and also you can't ever hide from its light, because equate this to His love as you can also never hide from its light, because equate this to His love, because you cannot ever hide from the sun's light, because even at night its light is reflected by the moon. And so if you equate this with His love, you remember that it's never gone. Even when it's dark around it, there's something reflecting. There's something that can remind you. There's something there, always. And then in verse 8 of Psalm 19 as well, I have highlighted, "The commandments of the Lord are right, bringing joy to the heart. The commandments of the Lord are clear, giving insight for the living." And I wrote, "Therefore we should not doubt or hesitate on the things that we know we are supposed to do." Which we should not. That doesn't mean that we never will or that we never have. It means we need to remember to not hesitate on the things that we know we should be doing. And in the terms of hesitation, technically speaking, hesitation in itself is not the problem. It is what we do after feeling that, whether we go forward in faith regardless of what we feel, or if we hold back because we gave our feelings more power. In Psalm 22, verse 3 and verse 9 through 10, first in verse 3 is, "Yet you are holy." And in verse 9 through 10, "Yet you brought me safely from my mother's womb and led me to trust you at my mother's breast. I was thrust into your arms at my birth. You have been my God from the moment I was born." And I wrote, "What we must always go back to in trials and in joy. Every breath and every life-filled moment is something to thank God for He gave it to us as soon as we were born." I don't think I have much to add to that one, because it's kind of reiterating what I have said already. And in Psalm 23, verse 1, I have an anchored truth, "The Lord is my shepherd, I have all that I need." And I wrote down, "In times of lack, remember your eternal gifts and what you always have had and always will, and even the temporary gifts that He does give to you." Because if you remember your eternal gifts, you remember the things that will never go away. But if you also remember how gracious He has been to give you the temporary things that you have, and when you really think about it, you have a lot. You have, regardless of your situation, you have plenty that you can thank Him for. The temporary things include the beautiful things of nature. That is also temporary. It's not an eternal gift that will never go away. Trees can be cut down. Flowers can be pulled. These things are not always there, but they are still a gift. In Psalm 25, verse 4, I highlighted this and put in the note that it can be a prayer for uncertainty, which says, "Show me the right path, O Lord. Point out the road for me to follow." Because this is one thing that we can pray when we're uncertain. We have a decision to make, we just don't know. Anything that has any uncertainty, that can be helpful to pray when you're not certain in any aspect. Then in Psalm 27, verse 1, in Psalm 27, verse 1, Specifically, I mainly had written down, remember this. As the Lord is my light and salvation, so why should I be afraid? The Lord is my fortress, protecting me from danger, so why should I tremble? We need to remember that nothing can stop us from doing and impacting what needs to be done and impacted, because it is all in His plan. And I have highlighted in Psalm 27, verse 10, the Lord will hold me close. And I wrote down, and He never lets go. Don't let the outside things make it so you do not recognize anymore or notice His hold on you. Sometimes, if you're wearing glasses or you wear a necklace or a bracelet even, sometimes the things that you're doing besides that make you forget that you have it on because you don't recognize the feel of it anymore. And so if you bring that even deeper into God's hold, God's hand, God's love, you can think about that you do not want to let anything else that you're doing or anything else that's going on around you distract you from the recognition of Him. Then we have in chapter 29, verse 3 through 6. It says, the voice of the Lord echoes above the sea. The God of glory thunders. The Lord thunders over the mighty sea. The voice of the Lord is powerful. The voice of the Lord is majestic. The voice of the Lord splits the mighty cedars. The Lord shatters the cedars of Lebanon. He makes Lebanon's mountains skip like a calf. He makes Mount Hermon leap like a young wild ox. And I wrote down, His power and splendor can be represented a fraction by nature. Nature's wonders and powers are just a small show of His power. So if you think about how powerful nature can be and how splendor-filled everything is, remember that it's just a small part and a small representation of what He is capable of. Then I also highlighted Psalm 29, verse 7 through 9. The voice of the Lord strikes with bolts of lightning. The voice of the Lord makes the barren wilderness quake. The Lord shakes the wilderness of Kadesh. The voice of the Lord twists mighty oaks and strips the forest bare. In His temple, everyone shouts glory. And I wrote, if this is an example of God's power in nature, think what He can do through your life and through you. Because if He's this powerful in nature in things that aren't going to be impacting directly through communication, through actions, and through things that we do, then think about what He can do through the things that we do and in our life. And then in chapter 30, verse 1, it says, He refused to let my enemies triumph over me. And I wrote, remember, you can laugh at the devil once you remember that he's already defeated. That whatever happens, good or bad, has an impact and a breakthrough, no matter when or who it's for. Which brings me back to what I was saying before, of how the devil never ruins plans. No one ruins his plans, not his eternal plan. The plan that would be the ideal plan, the ideal plan of where people always trusted Him, never fell into temptation. That's different, but that's not His eternal plan. He always knew what was going to happen. He always does know what's going to happen before it's even a thought in our heads. And then in Psalm 32, verse 7, it says, For you are my hiding place. You protect me from trouble, and you surround me with songs of victory. And I wrote, For the battle is already won, and you can't even imagine the victory. Another reference back to you can't necessarily see how it's going to be won or how it's going to be answered, but it will be answered and won no matter what. And then in Psalm 33, verse 18, it says, The best equipped army cannot save a king, nor is great strength enough to save a warrior. Don't count on your war horse to give you victory. For all its strength, it cannot save you. And I wrote, money or riches, man's power or authority. Resources of any kind are nothing to you, truly, unless you give these things to God and ask for His wisdom, His guidance to help you use, and share what you have in the way that falls in His ways gives all the glory to Him. Because if you try to use these temporary physical things without His guidance, without His help and His wisdom and His guidance, it's not going to do anything for you or for others. Not truly. It won't have as much of an impact as it could if you ask for His help and His wisdom. Then in Psalm 33, verse 20 through 22, says, "We put our hope in the Lord. He is our help and our shield. In Him our hearts rejoice, for we trust in His holy name. Let your unfailing love surround us, Lord, for our hope is in you alone." And then I wrote, "When we hope for something, don't just hope. Pray and recognize that it can't be done without God. And if you believe in someone, believe in their capabilities through God's will and power. Recognize that His plan determines the outcome and not His capabilities or the gifts that were given to the person." Because if we forget that, we will think that it wasn't answered, or that we weren't good enough, or He didn't help us be good enough. It's impacted based on what outcome is best for our situation and our lives. Then I highlighted in chapter 34, verse 5, "Those who look to Him for help will be radiant with joy." And I wrote down, "His love's so good that when you receive it and come back to it and recognize it, you cannot help but be joyful. And you can be joyful even if you or your situation is not a happy one. Because joy and happiness can be two separate things, but they can lead to the same outcome. Because you can have joy in God without being happy with where you're at. Because the joy helps you get through and helps you grow through what you're going through. Because without the joy, then you're just miserable, and that's not going to help, and that's not going to lead you through what you need to do and what you're dealing with. And that's not meaning to say that you have to be happy or joyful throughout the entire situation, because that's not even biblical. Everyone in the Bible got upset and frustrated. Almost everyone in the Bible had a point of being upset, sad, or frustrated, or confused. But the point is to go back to the joy of the Lord. And that's all that I have done from this past week of Bible journaling. And so I will do another video in the future recapping more of what I am doing. And so I hope you enjoyed this and maybe got a little something from it. But either way, I will see you in my next video. Bye!